Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this is the Telemanker Review. It is Saturday, the 24th of May at 11:15 p.m. And yeah, I'm doing 2 podcasts in a row. I just sort of feel it. Tonight I just want to, have a casual chat, I guess what you'd call a fireside chat, as they used to say, about the world, the stuff I'm talking about on the Talamanca Review. How to digest it. What you can do about it. And I don't mean to change the world, but to exist with the reality of it. Everything about this human race is strange. Nothing adds up when you think about it. If you're honest with yourself. If you have the courage to deviate from conventional or collective, let me choose my words carefully here, pseudo-consensus of the collective, blue screen hive mind, massively distributed MK Ultra. If you have the courage to live in defiance of that and say that the truth of my life experience does not corroborate with what we're being told. I know. He's got a PhD in physics. Oh, I know. He's got a PhD in evolutionary biology. I know. He's got a PhD in chemical engineering. I know. She's a tax attorney. I know. He's the President of the United States. Who am I? And I'm not talking about going out on the street and taking your bra off like it's 1967. I'm not talking about free love. I'm not talking about a CIA inspired cultural revolution. I'm talking about really standing up and saying, this is complete bullshit. How do you do it? Pretty easy for a man in an earthbag house who, when push comes to shove, can live on $400 a month comfortably with a better diet than 99% of North Americans. But I did this. It's not an accident that I'm here. I didn't scratch a lottery ticket and end up in the Talamanca Mountains in an earthbag house with fruit trees all around me and yucca growing and chicken eggs that can be bought for 10 cents an egg. I didn't do any of that. I didn't win it in a lottery. I made a decision. I stood behind what I'm telling you on this podcast and what I've been telling you in my books, which started to emerge as a reality to me around 2011. I started to piece it all together. And I look, when I say piece together, I mean, I was intuitively gifted certain key things that without them you can't figure shit out. There's a lot of stuff that goes into figuring out what's going on in the world today. A lot of stuff. A lot of people can't figure it out. A lot of people who claim to be super conscious, running ashrams, they can't figure it out. Or maybe they have, and they just don't think it's worth talking about, and they're investing 100% of their energy into producing transcendental consciousness. Consciousness beyond the astral, beyond the ayahuasca, beyond the sex magic, beyond all the bloodline bullshit, beyond all the stuff they can just do with the body and the first level of consciousness, the astral, which is about as far as they go. Certain Luciferian sects go beyond that, but much like the yogis, they don't really give a shit about the world that much. The people that are really driving this plan are really not that, they're not that elevated. Okay? If I were to distill everything down to one thing, what allowed this to come about? What is the one thing that more than anything else allowed this to come about? It was the externalization of the human being. It was the loss of the contemplative human being. And contemplation isn't, you know, looking at it in a formal way, you know, sitting in half or full lotus, specialized nostril breathing that some Kriya master taught you, being a vegan, this is all theater. I'm not saying that those things don't work, they do. But contemplation is simply the art of existing with yourself without any external distraction. You know, when you go through like a train station or some public place like a shopping mall, you know how they leave them open at night sometimes, all the shops are closed? And but certain exits into the mall are left open because there's a Cineplex. You know that guy, that Mexican guy with the pot belly you see pushing the floor buffer, and he's not listening to music, he doesn't have earbuds in, he's just doing his job and he's like in a trance? That's contemplating. If you come down here and you see people working in the field with machetes, clearing land, because the only way you can clear land down here is it's all manual. It's the main farming tool in Central America is a machete. They're out in that field, they're working all day, they're contemplating. Okay? This is what I mean by, and contemplation is the art of existing with yourself in a state of being in your consciousness. You're not getting carried away with anything. And you have a simple hypnotic task in front of you. Wax on, wax off. So what I'm getting at is that at a certain point in our history, everybody contemplated. Everybody was put into situations where they had to exist with themselves. Fixing a barn, bringing the crop in from a field, reading a book in an armchair by lamplight, oil fat lamplight in 1902, because you got no electricity in your farmhouse. Sitting quietly in your house 120, 130 years ago. This was contemplation. Okay? And then what happened is external stimuli, things plugging into us, became more and more and more prevalent. I can't even believe I'm going to use a reference point as cheesy as this. But here goes, because off the top of my head, I can't think of anything better right now. You know how in the Matrix movie, when Neo gets pulled out of the Matrix, his pod gets popped and there's all these things plugged into him. And the main one is right at the back at the cerebral cortex. And there are so many things accurate in that movie, I can't believe it's an accident, okay? That is where the entities go in. That's where you usually get possessed, is right at the cerebral cortex. That's where most entities go into your body. And it's very interesting to me that that's the only plug-in they used when they wanted to go into the Matrix. Right at that critical junction point. They call that, right, that brainstem, the reptilian brainstem. Okay? But the image of Neo in the pod having all of these things plugged into him. Very physical. We have as many things plugged into us now. There's just no physical cords going in. They're all psychic. It's a computer screen. It's a cell phone. It's a television. It's digital conversations. You ever thought about how scattered we are now? You ever thought about what friendship is now? It's kind of amazing. I generally will speak to Santo once a day. And minimum 30 minutes and usually an hour. We've almost kind of become like a news team, right? Like going over the stories of the day and trying to improve and refine our narrative like a couple Shakespearean thespians in 1774 in England at the Royal Shakespeare Company, going over our lines for a production of Macbeth. But the narrative working on is what's going on in this world. Santo lives way the hell over on the Gold Coast of Australia. And yet I interact with him daily from the rainforest in southern Costa Rica. And this is because there's all these things plugged into us now. And this externalization has been going on for, it probably begins with the radio. So the first, and I talk about this in Stardust Ranch, but I want to expand on this philosophical idea that first emerged 6 years ago in a very long chapter in Stardust Ranch called Crossroads. Now, if the story we're given is true, which is dubious, now I don't know if Tartaria is real. I just don't have the motivation to research it, okay? And if you look at the work I present, it's really in a certain time frame. It's really like 4 generations. So from my grandfather to my son, what has happened in the world in that time? My grandfather was born in about 1903. Both of my grandfathers were born about 1900. And my son was born 1997, and he's turning 28 this year. So that's 4 generations of my family. Grandfather, father, me, son. And you look at the scope, it's like a Stanley Kubrick wide lens on the 20th century and the early 21st century. The Devil in Us, a memoir of you and me. And you look at how much has changed. So the first instance of an external distraction. Now, an external distraction, I shouldn't say distraction, an external engagement, okay, would be something that enters into your consciousness and it's not by the physical presence of another human being communicating with you. So for me, the beginning of all of this is the radio. You could say the telegraph. You know, I remember there was a great HBO series in the early 2000s. That was just this golden age of HBO, okay? They had Oz, they had The Sopranos, they had The Wire, and they had this another series that not as many people saw, but was absolutely brilliantly done. Only had 3 seasons, I think 12 episodes to a season, and it was called Deadwood. And it was set in this Dakota town that had experienced, was it Dakota? Montana or Dakota? One or the other. This town that had a little bit of a mining boom, and it was about the town building out and everything. It was like a theatrical version in full verisimilitude. The murders, the knifings, the whores, the taverns, the saloons, the casinos, the whore houses. It was like the ultimate little town, and it was just growing because there was a gold boom. And the first thing they had to do was get rid of all the Indians, and they killed them all. And that doesn't. The show begins with you just hear about the U.S. Army decimating the Indians. And the big thing in season 3 is they get a wire, so you can pass messages. Now, before that, you had to write something out, give it to a guy. He goes on a horse, and he goes to the town 3 days by horse. Yankton. So Deadwood to Yankton. And so I guess you could say that The Wire, is the first instance of non-physical or dislocated voice. So you can speak to someone, and they don't have to be physically present. Now, in the case of The Wire, you just get a Morse code transcription of a message that was sent over this. Then comes the radio. Okay? Then you can actually hear voices in your house. Now, I want you to think about something. Okay? This is really interesting to think about. And this circles all the way back to the beginning of the podcast, where I'm at a point where I just don't believe a thing these fucking people tell us. I don't care, man. I don't care. Okay? None of it fucking adds up. None of it. Okay? So, all of these things start coming into our lives till we get to the point where we're at now. Right? And because I love communicating, I love writing books, and I'm very comfortable and grateful for the technology we have now. But I think you also need to guard yourself against it, and you have to spend time with yourself deliberately. You have to contemplate, okay? So all of these things have been affecting us. Now, we are supposed to believe that in these 4 generations that we'll go with the 4 generations of my family that I documented in The Devil in Us. So it begins with my grandfather, And they didn't have electricity for the longest time in their farmhouse. And they heated the house with a wood stove. And they lived in a town where it could get down to minus 45, minus 50 Celsius in January and February, easily. Okay? So we go from that to the moon in the 60s, allegedly, to China mining the other side of the moon now, to global communication with each other. And all of this is done in 4 generations. And it's all guided by an evolutionary principle that was documented, semi-documented. It's not, the theory of evolution is just a theory. It's not finalized science. It never moved beyond theory because they've never been able to prove it out in the fossil record. Okay? Now let me ask you something. If the theory of evolution is valid, why did it take us 100,000 years, or let's say 70,000 years, because that's about how long, according to anthropologists, we've been speaking and using language. Okay, so let's say 70,000 years. And I take that from Cormac McCarthy in an essay he wrote. I think the only essay he ever published. So 70,000 years, 70,000 years ago, we start using language, however primitive, okay? And language evolves, society evolves. We know things we can't explain have happened in the past. We don't know how they built the pyramids. I wouldn't give too much time to that, though. It's just an empty pursuit, right? But all of a sudden, in the late 18th century, okay, around I don't know, late 18th century would be around 1880. That's the 19th century. I'm a fucking idiot. Okay. Everything starts to change. And after it's like you would, if the theory of evolution was valid, you'd see a slow, gradual, and consistent progression. How is it that we go from shitting in outhouses, living in houses without electricity, and then in 4 generations to where we're at now, where the controllers or masters of the planet can do what they're doing, which is pulling off a massive cull of the human race, okay? And attempting to push something new forward. And whatever that is, I don't know, but it's not going to be fully human. It's going to be some kind of hybrid they're going for. And like I said, it's not the first time this has happened down here, according to the Akashic Records. So needless to say, I don't believe in the science of evolution. I think it's complete fucking horseshit, okay? Is there an evolutionary principle? There is a principle of change and augmentation of species and human beings, but I think it's based on the consciousness using the universal mind power to transform the matter in a slow time. Okay? So fast would be a miracle, you know? Slow would be 1, 2, 3 generations, and then you change everything. But there's no way that evolution is a valid theory. So then if that's not a valid theory, then number one, it brings all science into question. Okay? And now we have a discipline called evolutionary biology. One of the Weinstein brothers is an expert in this. I forget what, the slimmer one with the beard. How can you have an expert in something that is patently false? Okay? And if that science is patently false, what other sciences are patently false? It's like the whole thing is a house of cards in terms of what they're calling reality. Now, what they've managed to do from the beginning of the dislocated voice, which is the radio, they have every couple decades massively pushed the ball forward. Okay? So you start with radio, then shortly after that, you get the television, and then from there, you get the computer, and it's just, telegraph, radio, telephone, television. I guess before television, you had the moving pictures. You could go to a cinema and watch moving pictures. And that's another interesting thing, too, as we engage all these screens. They say these New Age prophets say that we're going to 5-dimensional living in reality. It seems to me like we're going to 2D. Because everybody is spending all their time in front of a screen, which is 2 dimensions. It's not even 3. But what has slowly happened, unless you're extremely disciplined, the art of contemplation has disappeared. It's disappeared. That quiet time, like the guy on the floor buffing machine, or the farmer, or the factory worker who just sort of goes into a trance. I don't think the factory work counts, though. There's too much stress. You could lose a hand and stuff like this. Everything we do now, all the time we spend now, is connected to something. Okay? And what suffers is the growth of true perception, which is always going towards transcendence. First chemical, then transcendent. Okay? Material, chemical, transcendent, the 3 stages of consciousness. Transcendent could be equated with, aspects of what you'd call non-duality as a philosophical or spiritual understanding. But transcendence goes even beyond non-duality. And there's another weird thing. I'm just going to say this. I'm just going to have... And look, tonight's podcast, I'm just going to title Speculating on a Hypothesis is All, which is the chief of police from Miller's Crossing. I think the second or third film the Coen brothers did in 1990. If you haven't seen it, it's my favorite movie. And I've seen thousands of films. Okay? My favorite movie is Miller's Crossing. And the chief of police in this unnamed city during Prohibition gangster fighting is named O'Doul. He's Irish. And he's getting chewed out by a lieutenant in the Irish mob, and he because he's criticizing the boss, because the boss is blowing up clubs, and why do we need all this violence for? And the lieutenant chews him out and says, know your place, basically. And the chief backs off right away, and he goes, whoo, Jesus, Tom, I know I don't know nothing. I'm just speculating on a hypothesis is all. And that's what tonight's podcast is. I'm just speculating on a hypothesis is all. And these all begin in my intuition, and then they get seeded into my contemplative life. And then when something gets rooted in my contemplative life, it comes back. Okay? And generally the answers that come back are right. And I'll know they're right if I get what I would call, it's a kind of spiritual corroboration. You can get 2, 3, 4 of them if you're skeptical. Like The unseen will work with you until you're happy. It's like a contractor who wants it truly is concerned that you like your finished kitchen. Okay? That's the creator. He's got infinite patience. It's got infinite patience. But tonight I'm going to throw an idea out. Remember quite some time ago, almost going back to the beginning of the Talamanca Review, where I did that show on non-duality? And I showed that video of that Asian woman. I think she's Chinese. I lived in Southeast Asia for 2 years. I can tell the difference between Japanese, Korean, and Chinese. I'm pretty sure Susan is Chinese, and she calls herself Suzanne Non-Duality. And I was like watching these videos, and I'm going, wow, I've been meditating my whole life, and wow, this just kind of clicked for her, like getting hit with a rock, and all of a sudden she's enlightened. And I don't want to say it was jealousy, but maybe part, right? And I started watching her videos, and it just started building and building and building. This intense mistrust of what she was saying. I don't think she's lying. You see, this is what is so tricky about the time in which we live. Because the people, if they are people, giving us the information, believe what they're saying. Okay? They believe what they're saying. So you got non-playing characters, people who can just learn a series of routines and regulations, like a cop in a cruiser, like a bail court judge, like a public prosecutor, a public defender, all of these people who fill roles in the system. You don't have to be conscious to do those. You can be like a vacant human being with no internal monologue. And you just memorize what you're supposed to do. You have no compassion. So there's never going to be anything in the center of your chest contradicting your orders and your function and your role. And that's the kind of people the system likes, by the way. If you want to understand why this system is so fucked, I just explained it to you. Okay? But I'm watching these videos like a year and a half ago, Suzanne Non-Duality, and I'm going, what is it? What is it? What is it? And then one day, a little voice or a little when I say a voice in my head, it's not really a voice. It's just you get a realization. One day I have this realization. She's been scalped. Or she was never there to begin with. And by scalped, I mean her inner self was taken out and something else was put in there. Okay? Now, with all the progress we've made and the evolving theories being espoused by the Talamanca Review, I'm starting to wonder if this isn't alien-human hybrid. Okay? Now, here's why I say this. In the normal progression of consciousness, you go through stages. Now, I've told you all kinds of, again, and maybe this is why I do story podcasts from time to time. But let's go back to the simple ghost story from the cottage. Okay? That's an anchor experience in the astral. Okay? Now, I can't speak to the dead, but I know the dead are there, and I know at certain times, human beings can speak to the dead, and certain human beings can do it on a regular basis, mediums and various forms of psychics. I don't recommend this, by the way. And if this ability flared up in me and I could talk to the dead anytime I wanted, I'd shut it down. Honestly, I would. Okay? I would. I'm not into all this shit. Had the Ligurians reach out to me twice. I'm cordial when they visit in meditative trance. I'm very cordial, but I'm just like, okay, I'm a human being. I need to learn how to be a human being. I thank you, But, I mean, some people, they have a dream experience or a meditative experience with a Palladian. 2 months later, they got a YouTube channel up, and they're like the Palladian Chandler. And they get 15, 20, 30,000 subscribers. And I'm just looking at this and going, the Palladians can't solve our problems. And if they could, they should fucking incarnate on the planet, grow up in the public education system, and then apply their Palladian genius to the planet. It's against spiritual law to fix a problem in a realm if you're not in that realm. And if you think about it, it'll become completely clear why that is. Because the realms are to learn. So if you have to have something come in from outside the realm to bail you out in the realm, then the system's working. God fucked it all up. No offense, please excuse my blasphemy. But it is a what if. It's an if. I'm not saying he did. So now I'm thinking that this Suzanne non-duality might be an alien-human hybrid. Because, and not just her, these other people that are having, suddenly they're slipping into non-duality. And my neighbor across the mountain talks about this too. Sudden, spontaneous non-dual consciousness. Well, what about the progression through all the layers? What about the year or two when you're at a certain level in your meditations where you're having all these dreams in different parts of the timeline because you're going through the causal layer of this fabric, this multi-dimensional membrane we live in? What about all the astral experiences? What about all the cosmic consciousness experiences on the mental plane? You don't need those? You're just going to go from material consciousness to non-duality now. Well, what in the fuck was the point of building this ladder in the first place? It's like the creator is contradicting his own design and plan. I'm just speculating on a hypothesis is all. I know I don't know nothing. But you know what else I know? These scientists don't know fuck all either. Okay? They don't understand how conscious... Well, they do, I guess, the observer effect in physics and stuff like that. Which is why stillness is so important to understand anything, which is why the art of meditation is important. If you look up the observer effect and watch a few YouTube videos, or God forbid, read something. It's a fascinating concept in physics, and I totally believe it. In fact, I know it to be true, but not through calculus, through my own experience as a contemplative. It's the idea that when we look at something, us just observing it changes it. Okay? So I'm not buying this non-duality. It sounds like some Cynthia Crawford shit to me. That's what it sounds like. Okay? Does not sound normal at all. Oh, I slipped into non-duality. Life's just a bunch of energy moving around, don't you know? And it's so cold and dispassionate. Okay? And there's no heart. Very weird. I am utterly convinced, folks, that we are being colonized. We are being colonized. I think this is real. I think we've hit on it in the Talamanca Review. And I have to be honest, I'm not the first person to come to this idea. There was a professor in the United States. He's still alive. But, I mean, this is another thing about the time in which we live. You can hear the most extraordinary things that would be the information defining a century in the past. And now it holds your attention for maybe 2-3 years, if it's huge, and a day or a day and a half, if it's not huge. The guy I'm referring to, I believe his name was Professor Jacobson. Let's take a look. So his name is Professor David M. Jacobs, and he fits into a class of professor that sort of risked their reputations to talk about first alien abductions, which were laughed at, and the false catharsis, of course, was the X-Files when it was going on. So that's how the military-industrial entertainment pharmaceutical complex works. So the normal intuition and as Cliff High says, the natural psychic ability of human beings, we pick up these things. And so that this doesn't build to a chatter and communication and become a movement in society, they displace the energy into false catharsis, which is why Chris Carter got the X-Files, which was pretty much written by the CIA, by the way, or DARPA. Not written, but the story ideas and stuff like that, right? And again, if you've read Stardust Ranch, I talk a lot about John Mack and his work on abductions. And John Mack, he was killed by a drunk driver giving a lecture on his theories in the UK, the United Kingdom, and the driver went up on a sidewalk to kill him, and John Mack was the only guy that was killed. John Edmonds told me straight up he was taken out, okay? So you can talk about these things now, and I wouldn't say that that means we live in a time of greater freedom. I would say that it means we live in a time where they may feel they're beyond the point of no return. We can't stop them, so they don't care. So John Mack also was a brilliant guy talking about these things. But the guy I'm referring to tonight who really said this is an invasion and hybrids are walking among us was David M. Jacobs, who taught, I believe, at Trent University. And let's close tonight's show with a 17-minute clip from him. I know you love to spend all your time with me, but I feel as though I should corroborate what I'm saying a little bit with some other people's information, okay? So that we're not completely out on a limb here. I'll come back after the clip and sign off, okay?
The abduction phenomenon is clandestine. And the way it is clandestine is that the way the secrecy prevails is that first and foremost, the abductees are not allowed to remember what happened to them, obviously. And so when they do remember, it's not a full memory. It's in bits and pieces of memory. It's got dream material in it. It has material of maybe perhaps some popular culture in it, and it's severely truncated usually. And sometimes people say things that literally never happened, using hypnosis to find out what did happen. And in fact, nothing happened that they said. They were abducted. But all abductions, all of them that I have looked at, are physical. People are physically missing from their normal environments. Might be missing for 2 or 3 hours, where people search for them and call them, and they're not there, and there's an emergency call that they missed, and this and that, and parents have searched for their children, and children have searched for their parents. This is common. Therefore, they are taken when they are missed the least. That means that they're not taken out of work, because that would be damaging in a sense. They're not taken when they're in the middle of a party, although sometimes that happens. Wander into the backyard and don't come back for a couple hours. They're oftentimes taken at night when they're alone. They don't have to be asleep. It's not sleep paralysis. It has nothing to do with it, anything that has to do with sleep. But that's when they'll be missed the least. And so the clandestine nature of it prevents people from knowing. I'm going to throw out an erroneous number. I'm going to say maybe 90% of people who are abductees do not know that they are abductees.
How does that work?
Well, they have had unusual experiences. They might have unusual displacements in time and place. They're doing something at 1 o'clock, and then suddenly they're across the street and they're doing something else, and it's 3 o'clock. And they think, gosh, that was weird. What happened? And then they think, well, I'm just not going to think about this. And because they're abductees, they're not supposed to remember, and they sort of know that, and they just go about their business. Other ones incorporate it into their lives, thinking this is just the way life is. Oddly enough, but I have had that. Now, people see other people being abducted and are not abducted themselves. People are abducted in groups and can confirm each other's abductions. People can sometimes, and this happens, meet other abductees at random, run into them on the street or something like that, and each one recognizes each other from being together on an abduction event. It's rare, but it does happen. And so there's a physicality to this. It's not a mentality.
So, what's the difference between that deja vu experience where two abductees are seeing each other
Sessions with
and recognize each other, or someone who's saying, you know what, I resonate with you, maybe I've seen you in a past life kind of thing? How do we distinguish between that and the abduction experience?
It's difficult to distinguish between people who think they have past lives or they've seen people on a higher plane of intellect or emotion or consciousness or whatever, unless you do hypnosis. By looking at people over decades, I can see change in time, I can recognize differences that are happening, I can see the progression of the phenomenon, and I've been extremely fortunate to be able to do that. There's obviously a trajectory to the abduction phenomenon. It is not an examination of people. These aliens are not interested in what makes us tick. We used to think this years ago. I used to think this years ago.
What do
But
you think now?
this turns out to be a program with a beginning, a middle, and an end, and it is goal-directed. And what we're looking at here is a workforce that is abducting people and, how can I just say this straight out, creating other beings who we call hybrids, who are different stages of hybrids, although it's probably more of a smooth continuum than my stage idea, of early stage hybrids who look sort of like gray aliens, and middle stage and late stage and human stage, and then what I call hybrid, who are beings who, and this is new information, who are being trained to live here, and their training comes from abductees.
You've had the opportunity to observe a lot of patterns and a lot of information. Have you grasped an agenda by these ET connections?
There are three pillars to the abduction phenomenon. There's actually a fourth one, but I'm not including it because it's not as, well, I'm not including it. Number one, it's intergenerational. If a person is an abductee, their mother or their father, or sometimes both, were abductees. If they were abductees, almost certainly their mother or father was an abductee. When the abductee has children, and let's just say has 2 kids, they will be abductees. And when they marry a non-abductee, all of their children, the 2 kids' children, if they each have 2 each, that's 4, they will all be abductees. Therefore, the intergenerational aspect of it makes sure that there are plenty of abductees around. It keeps up with the population, and the second pillar is that it is global. This is not an American phenomenon. The UFO phenomenon has been noted around the world, and the UFO phenomenon is the abduction phenomenon. It is. They are one and the same, in my opinion. The third pillar is that it is clandestine. And the only way you can, in the thread I wrote a long piece about the meaning of secrecy and how this has to be kept secret and that has to be kept secret and this and on, all the ramifications of non-secrecy and all that. It boils down to one sentence. They don't want us to know what they're doing. Global, intergenerational, secret. This does not add up to good. I don't see good in these 3 aspects of it. I can't be happy about it. So, because of the global nature, because of the clandestine nature, and because it keeps up with a booming human population. When I was born, there were 2.3 billion people on Earth. Now, I'm 73. There are 7.4 billion people on Earth in my lifetime. It's extraordinary. But the requisite number of abductees remains constant. If not, there are more than is needed now. So, when I say what is the meaning of all this? Why are they doing this? I can boil it down to two words, and it's a guess. Because these beings do not say, but all the indications point to something I just call, in grandiose terms, planetary acquisition.
That's a fantastic summary of a very powerful perspective.
Well, there you have it. He goes on a bit longer, but I figured it was okay to stop there. Planetary acquisition. Okay? Now, I forgot about Dr. Jacobs. He was a history professor at Temple University, I think. And there you go. And John Mack, you should read up on too. And I mean, everybody should be picking up on this because this is about the most important thing going on the planet. And that's one of the reasons I think we live in an age of distraction, is they don't want us tuning into this. What can we do about it? I don't know. I don't know. And more importantly is take a close look at what's being achieved on the planet. Okay? Like, what goals are being achieved? Which groups of human beings are still achieving their goal? And given that we're in the midst of an alien invasion, and some groups of people are saying that this is one of the great times in human history, and a great spiritual figure is coming in certain religions, you might want to factor that in to this whole UFO and invasion thing and abduction thing and hybridization. Okay? Because they're all connected. So the age of distraction continues. We're going to continue to get good, really good TV shows that we can pirate and download. I don't even know how these people are making money. Disney, Netflix, HBO Max. Everybody just torrents now. Everybody just downloads. So, and yet they just keep doing it and doing it and doing it. Ask yourself why. Well, it's a military campaign. You spend money to gain a goal, and they'll get paid back when their goal is achieved. And their goal, I think, is the planet. Okay? Now, I'm not trying to be scary tonight. I'm not trying to do a spooky podcast. This is just what came in tonight. I thought I'd talk about it. And that's it. And before I sign off tonight, I want to say hello to my buddy Don in Staten Island. Say hello to your mom for me. And you folks be well. And remember, life is always beautiful no matter what's going on. Because in our transcendent form, we're eternal and unchangeable. And the permutations that go on down here, they just happen, you know? There's nothing really to get all worked up about. So, I'm Bruce McDonald. This is, or has been, the Talamanca Review. And tonight, I'm just speculating on a hypothesis is all.